everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPhone 6 and compare it against the iPhone 6 Plus and see which specific phone you should go and buy in 2023. Now, this is complicated because on one hand, I wouldn't recommend anyone to buy these phones anymore, but it is very interesting because taking a look back for so many years after a phone came out, especially like 9 years after these ones, it's actually kind of interesting when you take a look at it because both these phones are very, very different, but they are so similar in 99% of the ways that it is kind of interesting to see how the Plus phone holds up past the standard iPhones that came out, many years. How the standard iPhone holds up against the Plus iPhone many, many years later. Now, on the outside, both of them are very different. The iPhone 6 had that 4.7-inch IPS LCD panel. This was a good panel at the time, but definitely it's aged into definitely an older looking panel. But when you take a look at the iPhone SE 3 that Apple's still making, it's still an iPhone that Apple made. It's just crazy that Apple's still making and using the same design that they used back in 2014 on this one. With the iPhone 6 Plus, this is kind of a better looking panel. It's bigger, 5.5 inches. It's an IPS LCD panel. It's 1080p, so it's definitely a higher resolution there. But what's crazy about the iPhone 6 Plus is that this is actually a device that is actually still kind of more fitting into today's standards than the iPhone 6. 5.5 inches is pretty big. People like big phones still. And honestly, this phone feels smaller than when it used to be back in the day. So that in and of itself is kind of another interesting thing and kind of an interesting change between these two devices too. Both of them have Touch ID sensors, lightning ports at the bottom, and on the back they have the full-on aluminum back, which looks and feels very, very good. As I mentioned back then, it's super nice basically having this type of capability on having a very good build, especially in a phone in 2014. But iPhones have always been notoriously very premium, and these are no exceptions. Now, camera-wise, basically the exact same type of camera. So you're getting an 8 megapixel sensor on the back, 1080p standard camera with a 1.2 megapixel standard camera on the front. And as I mentioned, these are pretty basic cameras. It's not anything crazy. I think with these two devices, what's there to say? They're very, very basic types of lenses. And I don't really think Apple has held these cameras up to a crazy standard. Even back in 2014, I think people were doing 1080p, maybe even almost 4K for the most part. But it wasn't until the iPhone 11s that Apple actually brought over 4K at 60 on the front at the time. So these are no different, but it's still a pretty decent camera for how old this phone is. But definitely the Samsungs of that year, I think probably did a better job than these ones in terms of software. These phones are pretty much outdated with software. They've been outdated for a long period of time. These things did end up stopping around that iOS 12 framework. But the craziest thing is that these things are still kind of supported with software. They've been getting iOS 12 updates even up until this year. It's 2023, and these phones are still kind of supported, which is incredible. So when I take a look at something like that, it's insane. I still cover all the iOS updates that come out, and whenever the iPhone 6 or 6 Plus gets an update, I talk about it. And it's crazy that Apple's still thinking about these phones. That in and of itself is an insane thing to me, which is just crazy. Now, wrapping it up in the performance side, basically the same type of performing phone. There's not really anything insane or different between them. If you kind of remember, they put the same chipset and the same amount of RAM and the same amount of everything on their base and big phones, kind of like how they look at the Pro and Pro Max models right now. So there's not really that big of a difference there either. But I do think with these devices, I think they're very slow in this day and age. 1 gigabyte of RAM with that Apple A chip, definitely not that fast of a performing phone anymore. I think everyone would kind of agree with that. So take it as you will, but I do think for a moment Apple did a decent job with these phones. I think the biggest takeaway is I think the Plus phones definitely have held up better. They've given us bigger displays. I just think bigger phones are just sometimes better, especially the older, bigger ones, because you are getting a bigger battery inside of them too. So you are kind of getting better battery life and all that. And that might make it a better, lasting phone for the most part. But I do think the standard iPhone 6 is pretty insane because it was the best selling iPhone of all time, or at least it was up until maybe a year or two ago. So in terms of that, that's basically how these two phones hold up in 2023. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.